This is music, and this is Enslaved's Axioma Ethica Odini. So welcome to the last spotlight video of the year, and I figured that since I don't cover that much black metal, I figured it would be sort of a perfect time to do that, to sort of finish off the year basically with some black metal. Of course not run-of-the-mill black metal, because this is Enslaved. I picked this one up when it came out in 2010. It's out on Indie Records, by the way. I picked it up when it came out because I was actually on a massive, just progressive music kick at the time, and Enslaved were known, and still are, of course, known as a progressive black metal band. So I figured I would check it out. So I went, picked it up. I bought it in a local branch of a store, basically record store chain called TP Music. They've gone out of business, sadly, because they had lots of good stuff, including this one. I picked it up. Now, one of the reasons why I do these highlight or spotlight videos is to go back and revisit releases that I haven't listened to that much, or that it's been a long time since I've given them a listen, or to revisit albums that I like very much, and so on and so forth. This is one that I listened to quite a lot back when it came out, and then for some reason I sort of moved on, I guess. So this was a great opportunity to go back and listen to it. So yeah, that's why I picked it up, because I was interested in progressive music in general. I still am. So, I went back, I gave it a listen. Now, so it's out, as I said, on Indie Records. It's from 2020. And as you can see, the version I have here looks very much like a 7-inch vinyl thing. And that's because, although it is the album and it's on a CD, it actually came with a 7-inch vinyl, 45 BPM, featuring 2 songs. And this, physically, this is a very cool, I would say, package, right? Looks like this on the front, looks like this on the back, right? And it's actually a gatefold, so you can unfold it. And of course, you have some really, really cool, I would say, artwork, and then you have the CD here, which is very simplistic, but it looks appealing as well. And it's very, dark. You sort of get actually a pretty good idea of the overall, shall we say, atmosphere on the album by just looking at the visuals. And I think that's actually great, right? That's what the visuals do. So a gatefold, 7-inch jacket, and it also comes with this insert, and I think this is, as far as I know, this is probably the original sort of official cover artwork. So, and this is basically the lyrics. So that's what that looks like. The vinyl looks like this, so nothing special, apart from the fact, I don't know, you can see how thick it actually is. So this is very heavy for a 7-inch vinyl. So I think it's cool. The polylined inner sleeve, that's just one I sort of transferred it to because it came in this. I hate these paper inner sleeves, but whatever. So that's the sort of the physical tome. I think a pretty cool package here. So let's have a look at some of the songs on this album. And let's start with the 2 sort of tracks that are on the vinyl itself. So the first one is called Jotunblod, which means giant's blood, more or less. Doom is part of the title, and that's a pretty good subtitle, because the song is very heavy, it's very dark in atmosphere, and it's very doomy, actually. It has like doom metal vibes. It's kind of like a blend of doom and black metal, and then it has a very epic feel to it. Pretty cool song. On side B, you have a song called Migration, and that song is also heavy. It's very melancholic. There are elements of alternative rock to it, like melancholic, almost like 90s, early 2000s alt rock. And that sort of characterizes the entire album. And one thing that I think is interesting is that as the song is very repetitive is not the right word, but it's very, very trance-inducing. There is a lot of repetition of sort of the same figure. So there's almost like seance-ish, trance-inducing. But it becomes more and more spacey as it progresses. I wouldn't say it becomes more intense, but it gets more and more of a spacey feel. And the artist that song makes me think of, for some reason, is a Danish melancholic, alternative, slightly progressive rock band called Mew. It's a completely different style of music, completely different approach they have to music, apart from the melancholy and apart from being sort of innovative. So I think that's kind of interesting. But those are the two tracks on the vinyl. So the tracks on the album itself, the CD, the first one is called Ethica Odini, and this is a strangely melodic and strangely catchy tune, and this also characterizes a lot of the songs in this album. It's very melancholic, and it has a pretty cool second part to it. It's almost, a lot of the songs are kind of like two or more parts or movements, like separate parts of songs, so they change from one part to another part to another part, and so it has a very melancholic second part with some pretty neat, I would say, guitar solos, very melodic guitar solos. Overall melancholic piece overall, but it changes from being kind of like sort of black metal-y to being more melodic and melancholic, although there's this inherent strange melody overall. There's a pretty nice use of harsh vocals mixed with clean vocals, and that also characterizes pretty much the entire album. The first part is kind of like a mid-tempo, tremolo picky, black metal tremolo picky, but sort of triplet kind of thing, with some triplet double bass drum, and then it changes into the second part, also tremolo picking, but not triplet anymore. So pretty cool, interesting song. The next one is called something along the lines of Raido or something like that. And this one is also interesting because it has some strangely groovy parts to it. It's not like a groove metal song or anything like that, but it has some strangely groovy parts to it anyways. And it's like a blend of up-tempo parts with mid-tempo parts. Again, some nice melodic lead guitars, and there's an almost like epic feel to this song. And again, the epic feel is kind of like darkly epic, and that sort of spans throughout pretty much the entire album. But I feel like it's in this song that it kind of sort of kicks in, if you know what I mean. The next one is called Warun, or something along the lines of that. This one is heavier. It's more doom metal-y, but rather than being slow and heavy, it's kind of like mid-tempo doom. But it has sort of the doomy part is sort of evolves around a kind of complex riff, actually, which is still kind of primal in a way, but also kind of complex. So that's a very interesting riff, I would say. And this is one of those songs that have like two parts to it as well. So the first part is this sort of heavy, strangely groovy part, and then you got a small kind of like transitional section with some ringing chords that are dissonant. Um, and then you got the second part, which is really cool, I would say. Um, it has some nice, clean vocals that are chanting almost. Um, and uh, there is some fast guitar picking, sort of kind of like the kind of pick sort of pops up every now and then, kind of like the fast palm muted guitar picking rather than unmuted tremolo picking. So I think that's Warren is a very, very good song, I think. The next song is called The Beacon, and The Beacon opens out like a traditional black metal song with the sort of slow blast beats and a very, very simplistic, just tremolo picked riff. And it's a really nice reminder that you're listening to black metal. I mean, there are black metal elements throughout, but this is just the most pure and raw black metal you get right on this album. Most of the other stuff is more like melodic black metal, I would say. But it starts out with this traditional black metal opening. But then it kicks into another kind of almost like doomy and heavy part. And you have chanting vocals and you have spoken word. So it's very atmospheric in a sense, but the drumming becomes almost like rock drumming, like simplistic, 1-2 rock drumming, and it actually works really well. So another cool song in the shape of The Beacon. And then there is a song called Axioma. So obviously the album is named for two songs, Axioma and then Ethica Odini. And Axioma is a synth piece, very atmospheric with some chilling spoken word on top of it. So and it's considerably short, like 2 minutes or something. So it's almost like the band thought, okay, we're reaching the middle of the album. Let's just give them a bit of a breather and still scare the crap out of them. So a nice little sort of synth piece. And it's followed by a song called Giants, which is again heavy, doomy, not slow, but still has like doom metal and heavy elements to it. And it has a sort of almost like a stumping, marching feel to it. I mean, I'm probably just overinterpreting things, but kind of reminds me of, the march of the giants, the frost giants or whatever. Eventually it increases in intensity and also in terms of epicness. So it becomes more and more intense and more epic. Very cool song as well. And this is followed by a song called Singular, which is another melancholic affair, mid-tempo with some up-tempo parts. And this is another example of a song that has a very, very good blend of clean vocals and harsh vocals. This is probably the song where it's perfectly balanced, the two singing styles. So very good there, I think. And one thing that's interesting is that there's some very cool changes in this song. Very cool changes of tempos and impressions and so on and so forth. And the band also almost goes into kind of, maybe technical thrash metal is too much, but it goes into tech metal territory. They get a bit technical here with some technical sounding riffage and so on and so forth. I kind of like that, right? This is a very innovative album. For the most part, they go for a more like progressive kind of like feel, with clean singing, harsh vocals, like different parts of songs. They don't follow the sort of traditional verse chorus bridge verse chorus structure, so they're progressive in that sense. But in The Beacon, they go progressive in the sense of also drawing in some technical playing, which I think is really cool. I also feel, I mean, I'm not an expert on that, but I kind of like sense that I can pick up some jazz chords every now and then in this song. So this is probably, Giants is probably the most kind of progressive song as such on the album. Although the entire album, I would say, is progressive and innovative. It's followed by a song called Night Sight, which has kind of like a ballady kind of opening. Ballady. It's not a power ballad, but it's got clean guitars. It's got that kind of like a brooding feel to it. Then it morphs into, I would say, melodic black metal, melancholic, maybe even depressive black metal kind of affair. And the song kind of changes back and forth between sort of the ballady part and depressive, melodic, melancholic, whatever, black metal. So pretty nice back and forth there. And the last song is called Lightning. And that's another sort of mid-tempo, melancholic black metal part or affair with some, slight up-tempo parts every now and then, but for the most part mid-tempo. One thing that I think is interesting is that it kind of, towards the end, becomes almost power thrashy, because they switch from non-muted tremolo picking to palm muted, kind of like picking. Almost sort of a Randy Rhoads kind of riffing. I don't know if it's on purpose, but the sort of the nearest parallel I can think of, music-wise, genre-wise, is some kind of power thrash, power metal thrash, whatever. So a very strong album, I think, with some very, very good, innovative songs. But the band, what they do is they sort of exploit the power of repetition. So it is kind of trance-inducing, and this is, I think, something that became a staple of black metal, right? Sort of the repetition of considerably simplistic figures. The figures here are not simplistic, but they go with the repetition. But as soon as you almost get into a trance state, they change things up. And I think it's pretty cool. They exploit the power of repetition, and through that, they also exploit the power of changing things up. The songs are relatively long. I mean, they're between 5 and 7 minutes for the most part, so they're not super long, but they're longer than your average pop song. But they never feel like they're long when you listen to them. Maybe towards the end, they start feeling like they are actually 7 minutes long, but the first 2/3, I would say, of the album, it doesn't feel like you're listening to 5 to 7 minute long songs. They feel shorter, and that's of course because things happen, there are changes going on. And that's an interesting contrast, by the way, to the Migration song from the vinyl, because that is very repetitive and trance-inducing, although it becomes more and more spacey. So that's interesting too. Kind of appreciate that there's that song on the vinyl, but the power of repetition, the power of changing things up. Generally, the songs seem shorter than they are. There is a considerable, as I said, considerably epic feel, kind of like darkly epic. Part of this owes to the use of synths, keyboards, and there's also kind of like it's probably still like a synthesizer, but like an organ, like sound, kind of like in traditional prog rock from the 60s and throughout the 70s. So that's another progressive element that adds kind of like a feel of epicness too, as well. For the most part, they make use of a lot of black metal based tremolo picking and melancholic chords. Not as simplistic as traditional black metal, but it does have, it stems from the black, the black metal tremolo picking tradition. But it works really well because, as I said, the chords are more melancholic, so it adds kind of like an inherent melody. And whenever you have like guitar solos and lead guitar melodies on top of that, it just adds further melody, because the lead guitar work is actually very melodic, not shreddy or anything like that, although you can hear the dudes are good guitarists. but they opt for melody instead, and that works really well. So you have a distinct black metal feel and sound, although I would say there's more variation going on than on your sort of old school traditional black metal release, I would say. The production is actually very good, very crisp, very clean, without being clinical, you know what I mean? And the bass is audible. For the most part, the bass often sort of just follows along with the guitars and just adds a fat bottom to it. But occasionally the bass goes off on its own and does its own things, and that's really nice that you can actually hear what the bass does, because it does add another sort of dimension to this already complex and super interesting music. In terms of vocals, as I said, they make use of harsh black metal vocals combined with clean singing. For the most part, the clean singing is very chanting, but there's also some more like more singing, and there are some occasional death metal growls too, and that works really well, this combination of harsh and clean vocals. So overall, a very melancholic, very darkly epic affair. For my money, a really, really good album. It's black metal, but I keep thinking the genre of music it reminds me of the most is melancholic alternative rock. And again, the artist that it reminds me of the most, although it's a completely different approach and it sounds completely different, is the Danish melancholic alternative rock, slightly progressive alternative rock band Mew. And I hope it's not insulting to Mew or to Enslaved that I make this comparison, because I love both of those bands, and so it's really just a huge compliment. Anyways, a great progressive, melancholic, melodic black metal album, which is innovative. Enslaved's Axioma Ethica Odini. And as I said 20 something minutes ago, this is the last spotlight video of the year. So I wish you all a happy new year. I've really enjoyed going back and listening to releases in my collection, sort of putting my listening experience into words. I've also enjoyed listening to new additions to my collection, because that's another reason why I do these videos. Kind of makes me listen to new stuff and put my listening experience into words and sharing my impressions with you guys. So again, thanks for watching. Have a happy new year, and thanks to everybody who has supported this channel throughout 2021. Thanks to the vinyl community, the music community, to the metal part of the vinyl community. As I said, have a great new year. Thanks for watching, and the bonus devil horns